So you'll see that you'll continue to see inflation rise and just the cost of living. And this is where, when we're talking about cryptocurrencies and intrinsic value, they have none, because you still need to pay for basic commodities. And then it's like, oh man, we have to stop playing pretend. I'm like, sorry guys, get out of the metaverse. Got to stop playing imaginary Dungeons and Dragons.
All right, man, let's do this again. Round 2. I'm very happy to do this once again. I love watching your shit always from afar. You may see me just always approaching from 30 feet away on LinkedIn, but yeah, I'm always checking in, man. It's always good to see you just getting online, talking about crypto, talking about NFTs, talking about loads of random shit, but also then talking about really good, valuable stuff, which is why I love chatting to you, number one. And it's always great to catch up as well. So what have you been up to, man?
Nothing, just been living the dream. Here with the rest of the world, trying to figure out if the world's still going to be around tomorrow or day after that. But some people, it's amazing. Like, there's a lot of people just don't watch the news, who don't stay up on current events, and so sometimes they're taken by surprise about what's happening. Other times they're so focused on NFTs or crypto stuff that they forget there's, like, if you want to get out of the metaverse and playing pretend, there's so much to do in the real world other than fish, but there's so much to do. And that's really why sometimes I talk trash about NFT world, because it's like Dungeons and Dragons for a digital age, where we get together online and we make believe stuff that doesn't exist. Because as soon as you unplug and you get back to reality, you're like, oh shit, I need to pay rent. I need to go meet a girl or boy or someone who identifies as wanting to fuck with me. And so, this is where we come full scale, where there is this place for digital stuff, but there's also a place for like real stuff in real life, particularly as COVID ends. I think Clubhouse, you remember Clubhouse?
I remember Clubhouse, yeah.
Right?
Well,
It was popping for about 3 weeks. And so, but then Clubhouse couldn't compete with the great outdoors. It can't compete with recess. And so my general feelings, and again, this is not investment advice or anything, is that we'll see that shift from online imaginary digital goods, products, and services to real life. Here's what people actually need. Here's what people actually want. And so that's going to be interesting.
And that was interesting, because I think everyone was just like so fucked up from like COVID towards the end of last year, that they just, like, when they saw NFTs and saw like Metaverse start, whatever, it got like really, really crazy. And then it kind of died down. And then even we were having a discussion. I was like, oh, is this like a right thing to talk about? Whatever. And I was like, things kind of died down. And that's why you saw massive falls off the cliff of Decentraland of like 60-70% and all these other companies. But now as well, like when like all this like war is kicking up at the moment, and there's way more turmoil. It's interesting because like there's even more stuff that's kicking off now about it. So it's like it kind of has hung around a bit longer than expected, but it's still difficult to see like what the tangible long-term benefit would be.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And so I forgot to say my name. Should I introduce myself, or are we just gonna just go with it?
You can introduce yourself a small bit, of course.
So anyway, yeah, this is Samson Williams. I wear many hats, but I've decided that number one, I'm going to be a Darren super fan first and foremost, and secondly, I'm going to focus on fishing. But when I'm not fishing, I talk about blockchain AI. I wrote some books on it. I teach at Columbia University in New York, as well as University of New Hampshire School of Law. And I'm here to answer any of Darren's random questions as we speculate a little bit about the future of awesomeness and the future of humanity, particularly given the Russia-Ukraine events that have been unrolling. So, Darren, based upon that introduction, take it away. Ask me some really hard questions so I can make something up and pretend I know what I'm saying.
Of course, I'm going to get into the absolute detail. First thing I wanted to chat about was all me around payments of what happened over the last couple of weeks. So I know, you worked in kind of blockchain space, you've worked in that kind of like fintech space as well. How have you even seen like this kind of like unhinging of currencies and unhinging of payment rails, and even the influence of governments for doing this? Because I know obviously in the blockchain space, it's all laissez-faire and it's all open. What's your been take on this? Because a lot of these sanctions have hit the ordinary person the hardest.
So if you hear that train whistle, it's really for whom the bell tolls, and it tolls for Russia. Because why when we talk about payments, you're talking about SWIFT, you're talking about how money is transferred from one jurisdiction to the next. And so why this is so important is because when Russia was taken off the SWIFT system, their money was frozen. And so they have about $600 billion of USD, of American cash hanging out in different banks. And so what this does is, it's not that Russia, it's really less about payments and more about, will Russia strategically default on its debt? It's not
Mhm.
that they don't have the money to pay for it. I like Darren's eyes just got big. He was like, what? I was like, yeah, Russia owes billions, maybe even trillions of dollars of debt. And so it's not that they can't make their payments, but their money's frozen. And
Mhm.
so Russia might strategically decide, yo, if we're going to do this, if we're going to beef, I'm not paying you. What effect will that have on the markets? Then you're really going to see what effect that has on the normal person, on the day to
Mhm.
day person. And so we're talking about payments, but again, um, oh man, what is Graeber's first name? He wrote the first debt, the first 5,000 years. And so money is really just a record of debt, and Russia's going to show us how debt can be used as a weapon of mass destruction, or leverage as a weapon of mass destruction. It's not that payments aren't important. It's not that we don't want you to be able to go to the bank, take out what you think is money, or use your credit card or debit card. But really, what this highlights, the Ukraine Russia highlights, is how interdependent and connected the world is.
Mhm.
Because one, a sovereign nation all of a sudden can't do business with the rest of the world because they're acting bad. It's like putting them in the equivalent of putting a 5-year-old in timeout. It's like, when you learn how to behave, you can come out of timeout. How will that play off? Because that 5-year-old, that is Russia, they owe billions of dollars in debt, not only to the US, but just businesses around the world. So payments are important, but I think we should be also looking at debt as a whole.
Mm. That's interesting because like it's kind of the globalization kind of whole concept, whether it's like they're getting, oil, they're getting natural resources from Russia, they're either hiring them out, or Russia are now looking for foreign investment, even from China. Recently, I saw that they rejected the claims, they turned it down, said it wasn't true. But it shows like how connected, to your point, with interdependency, so that when something like this does fall down, it becomes much more of a casualty. Now, to be fair, this did actually happen as well in World War II. Like, everyone was so interrelated, but I suppose now it's just way more connected, and I know the stakes are a little bit higher.
So after World War II, when the Allies defeated the Axis powers back in the day, as a refresher, it was Germany, Japan, and Italy against the world. The world being primarily U.S., Europe, UK, and Australia, of course. Um, the US came back with the Marshall Plan, and the Marshall Plan pumped in billions of dollars into the European economy to rebuild Europe. That's actually how the dollar became the reserve currency of the world. We won the war, and it was like, hey, we're the only one who hasn't been bombed out, so we'll lend you money. And so fast forward now, because of technology, you don't need blockchain to be interconnected. You need HTTP, or the World Wide Web, as old folks from the 19th century call it.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, I was born in the 20th century rather.
20th.
Uh, were you born in the 2000s or the 1990s?
I just made it, man. 1996. I just
Oh, okay,
scraped
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it.
You're late 20th century as well, like
Yeah,
myself.
man.
But now we're even more connected, and in this connectivity, when we talk about payments, that's at the personal level, but we also have to be aware of sovereign debt, how that plays. And then when we talk about payments, we also need to be aware of, while Russia is invading Ukraine, the real player on the board we need to look at is China. Because not only is China lending or providing assistance, rather, let me go back. China is saying officially, we are doing nothing. We're neutral.
Mhm.
Unofficially, they are doing nothing, which is supporting, which is, by doing nothing, they are in fact supporting Russia's position in Ukraine. The other thing that China has told Russia, when Visa, MasterCard, American Express, and Goldman Sachs was like, we're out, we're leaving Russia, China was like, don't worry, we'll extend you credit. We'll roll out our digital currency, the digital yuan, to Russia. And I don't think Russia really anticipated that China would have such an influence over it. But when Russia got cut off but from the rest of the world banking, China's like, we can do this for you. That's going to put Russia in a very odd position in the future, because if you don't have ownership over your own currency, You don't have your own sovereign currency, but you're beholden to China. Before the show, we were talking about China does planning on 100-year cycles versus, how we do it in America every 4 years for elections. So we're going to be Russia's going to be at a really interesting point when there is quote unquote mass adoption of the digital yuan, uh, typically through an app called WeChat, because WeChat has WePay on it. And now all of a sudden, Russia is no different than El Salvador is to America. You use the American dollar because we say so. In Russia, you're going to use the yuan because the ruble's worth nothing.
And what's different there is the fact that the central bank digital currency, CBDC, or whatever the acronym for it is, it's all tracked and traced. And I had Richard Turn on my podcast, a great guy, super nice guy, massive respect for him. But as we went through central bank digital currency in such detail, and he's a fantastic book called Cashless, I was beginning to see the red flags. And I was thinking, like, from this oversight, governance, just pretty much having complete control over what's happening within the society. I was beginning to see this through it, even though I saw that there was obviously benefits. It's like, to your point, it's like blockchain. You explain it to me, of course there's benefits to it. That sounds fantastic, doesn't it? Decentralized, no one sees it, fantastic. But then when you look under the hood, it's like, okay, oh shit, there's a bit more to this, a bit more to this. So I suppose a state that is generally with more oversight of their individuals now potentially rolling this out elsewhere could have, like, it's almost at the point whereby rolling it back is more drastic. Now, to be fair to Richard's point as well, he was saying at the time that for them to roll out these rails, these payment rails to Russia or wherever the particular country was, would be a long road. But I suppose if they wanted to accelerate it, they could get it done, get it over the line in 5 years or whatever. And I suppose it is good for context to set the scene of what central bank digital currency is for people that don't understand.
100%. And so I just want to bring out two things. One, I was digging around my drawer if you heard all this noise, because if you're on the radio or listening, you can't see this what is it, Durham? Yeah, dirhams from United Arab Emirates. So I happen to have 100 dirhams in my drawer, along with $100 from the Bank of Jamaica. I went to Jamaica to do a class on marijuana, and then I was in track and trace. This is where blockchain is actually super useful. So if you're in Jamaica and you want to track and trace cannabis from seed to sale, blockchain is a really good application. It doesn't increase the value of the cannabis, but it's super helpful for tracking and tracing. So this is why I have this, because I spent a few weeks in Jamaica working on a project. And so this is my dirhams from United Arab Emirates. I just spent a lot of time there. And why I'm bringing these out is because what central bank digital currencies really highlight is why cash will always be king. Because CBDCs, I don't think there's anything that threatens democracy and privacy more than being able to track all of your financial transactions, because you have zero privacy. Whereas if you've got cash, for those of you on the radio, you can't see that I'm holding up euro, €1, in a United States quarter. So when you have this, when I give these to Darren, when I give this cash to Darren, that's it. There's no record. When you do anything online, anything on blockchain, you create an immutable distributed timestamp record. And I know, tumblers, but we can still see the traffic that's going into the tumbler even before we see it go out. And so if you want to regulate cryptocurrencies, you don't actually regulate cryptocurrencies. You regulate the off-roads, the off-ramps. You regulate the banks. You regulate it when it goes from digital fingerprint creating thingamajiggies to cash. Because this is where, as we talk about central bank digital currencies, cash is king, man. Because if you really want to do a transaction anonymously, use good old-fashioned cash. And it's a threat to democracy, particularly here in America. We're never going to embrace central bank digital currencies. It sounds good, but the moment politicians realize that all their donations are going to create an immutable distributed ledger of fingerprints and culpability, they'll be like, this is stupid. Whose idea was this? They're never going to let all that dark money and political campaign money actually be seen where it's coming from. So this is, again, where we go back to cash as king. The other thing I want to bring out, Darren, about central bank digital currencies is, in addition to being horrible for privacy, they're also programmable money. So you can't program this dollar to do anything other than I can just give it from my hand to you. That's it. But with CBDCs, I can program it so you can't buy anything with sugar over 5 grams in it. You're like, oh, you want to reduce diabetes? I'm like, 100%. And buy this. I'm going to program our CBDC so you can't buy soft drinks. And initially, you're going to think that's really cool. But then I'm also going to program it so you can't afford contraception, birth control pills, prophylactics. Then I'm going to program it so that you can't afford cannabis or any other, you can't not afford, but purchase cannabis or any other type of good products or services. And this is the funny thing about programmable money. And I'm going to say this in pause so I can get your reaction, Darren. If I can program money so I can not buy sugary drinks or prophylactics, I can also program money to automate paying of taxes. And so
Fuck.
programmable money. And so
Crazy, man.
this is where I'm going to pay you this £100 and I'm going to program it that when I pay you, it automatically deducts your taxes from it so that you never see it. Again, programmable money. It's the future, baby. It's amazing, baby.
Mhm.
Don't fucking do it. Which brings us back to this is why cash is king,
Mhm.
because it's not that I'm not advocating tax avoidance by any measures. I'm saying you should always pay whatever you're legally obligated to pay, but things can get a little bit weird when when your government can garnish or seize your money by entering a new line of code.
And when it's just that easy, it's the fact that like you're always at the mercy of someone else. And that was my initial point around like, it's crazy how they made these, sanctions on the ruble or even any sort of like USD that they had. But it's kind of like, okay, if you go to the other side where it's digital, it's like it becomes even easier. And it's like, okay, well now they can just access it and say this is the corner of the market they want. And this is what they want to do with it. So there's just way more kind of caveats that it's like up to your point earlier is that when nobody's thinking about it, and I know people are also kind of suggesting this online, you look on Twitter or whatever, that's kind of that kind of element of the internet, but for the most part these narratives can often get through and they can push it through, and especially in like states like China whereby they're going to openly actively use it in their own jurisdiction. If they push it over to Russia, potentially then they'll have the much more ammunition to really drive it forward.
100%. And the last point I want to bring out is that when you have programmable money, you your devs who program it aren't nearly as smart as the hackers who are going to unprogram it. And
Mhm.
so there's a whole slew of cybersecurity issues. Like we even with physical cash, we have counterfeiting issues. Uh, and so when you get into digital currencies, you will have a slew of counterfeiting issues. And so you're going to, again, it's just another reason why poor people will use central bank digital currencies so they can be taxed into oblivion. Rich people will be like, you need to pay me in cash.
Mm.
And then
Crazy.
the value of cash goes up. It's sort of like when you go to the gas station here in America and you pay for something, you can pay the credit card price or the cash price. The credit card price is always like 10 or 15 cents more than the cash price for gas. Um, and so we're in gallons versus liters. So I think there's like 3.8 liters in a gallon, something like that.
Something like that.
Um, there's a whoever's listening, they can fact check us on Google. I think it's like 3.8 liters to a gallon. But right now, gas in America is around $6 a gallon.
Mhm.
It's between $4 and $6 a gallon, I should say, depending on where you live. And so that's super expensive. That's like I'm going into euros, so excuse me if the conversion is at 100%. It's like 12 to 15 dollars per liter.
Mm.
I don't know what's the gas going out there.
Crazy high. I think I don't know what is per liter. I thought it was like 185 or even more, but I don't know. It's still skyrocketing. I'm not driving a car no more, so I can't. I've got myself out of there. But to be honest, that's it's a break from the whole idea about all oil going up to what is it, 115 a barrel or 120, and it's even like people are estimating that's going to go to 200 or even 300. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, if you're going long as fuck on oil, it's a good opportunity for you. But on the individual, it's not.
Mhm.
It was the same with 3-4 weeks ago. I remember I thought to myself like wheat was going to go absolutely haywire, which it did, 40%. Nickel, I
Mhm.
know, was obviously broke through and went crazy. It was like a short squeeze, pretty much like 130%. But yeah, basically that oil and commodities area is just getting absolutely fucked.
Yeah.
And sorry to interrupt you on this. Everyone thinks in terms of like when they're thinking like in terms of inflation, they're all thinking about like the drop in purchasing money, the purchasing power, but they're not really factoring in, for example, like oil. But no one is really factoring in at the moment the fact that how this could impact your products in super value, in supermarkets, in your
Mhm.
grocery stores, all these areas, and not necessarily like the big things, just all added areas, packaging, products, processed food, all these little different factors.
100%, 100%. So I just did some quick math. Uh, gas in your part of the world is about $7.03 a gallon, which is a little
Mhm.
bit higher than what we pay here in America, but it's creeping up across the board. You don't need me to do the math for you. You can see the cost of that, because what most people think is that even if they're like, oh, I'm gonna get a Tesla, I'm gonna get an electric car. How do you people think electricity is made?
Yeah.
And so, it's like, 60% of electricity is made from liquid natural gas. The rest comes from a mixture of nuclear energy, solar, and wind, and then, of course, coal. But most of it is produced from liquid natural gas, and the cost, of course, of liquid natural gas has also gone up proportionally 30 to 40% over the last few days. So you'll see that you'll continue to see inflation rise and just the cost of living. And this is where, when we're talking about cryptocurrencies and intrinsic value, they have none, because you still need to pay for basic commodities. And then it's like,
Mhm.
oh man, we have to stop playing pretend. I'm like, sorry guys, get out of the metaverse. Got to stop playing imaginary Dungeons and Dragons. The last point I wanted to bring up, since you brought it up, about wheat. So
Mhm.
Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. They produce what's called Black Sea wheat because they have a particular type of dirt there in Ukraine. And so when wheat production is interrupted in Ukraine, you're actually going to see food shortages in India and throughout Africa, because that wheat from India is exported. And so there's a scenario where, due to the severe food, when you have, it's about 12% reduction, or rather 12% of the grain that went into India came from Ukraine. It doesn't seem like a lot, but that 12% equals a lot of people, a lot of mouths in India. And so we have to be on the aware for food shortages and potential famines that will roll through, because the cost of moving this grain, these commodities, has also increased. In poor countries, if you're poor, you're poor. No one's going to make you rich overnight. And so you still have to pay even more for food, and just for the food, and then for shipping. So again, this is where geopolitics come in, because people
Mhm.
think it's just about Ukraine and Russia, but we live in a connected world. We just got to figure out how to be civil, we need to figure out how to be less human and more humane to each other.
That's crazy. I remember hearing in like 2008, it was like, well, post 2008, I was quite young at the time. And it was saying about how, like, oh, how much people affected their jobs, how much people default on their mortgages. But it's like, yeah, okay. But during recessions, how much people actually die during recessions? How many people run out of money? They literally starve to death, which is obviously, in your extreme poor areas that are pretty much at the level of complete what's the word really for it, just complete at the end of their cash to begin with. They might be have a few like cattle or whatever, but it's those people that are have the extreme hit hardship. And again, that's not what media is portraying. I know media can't cover everything, but I'm trying to say that, to your point, like in India, that number is unquantifiable. You will never be able to hit that number to see how much people were infected.
Yeah, it's gonna be difficult. So I always encourage anyone, when I get on a podcast, they're like, first off, Samson, all you told me that you did was fish. And I'm like, that's technically correct. That is my favorite pastime. But I'm also with my buddy George.
Hmm.
We play economist. So most people know that we wrote a book called Blockchain and the Space Economy, which in early 2020 no one cared about, because they're like, what's blockchain? What's the space economy? But then we explained it to them, and so we do occasionally look at real data, real stats. But again, if you're listening and I say something, you're like 12% in India, that's wrong. Fact check me. Send me a link, send me a post on LinkedIn, be like, it wasn't 12, it was 11.4%. I'm like, my bad. I'm off. Um, and I just, since I mentioned the space economy, I do want to mention something, because this is really a conversation about oligarchs, American oligarchs versus Russian oligarchs. And the difference is, when an American oligarch does something, people cheer. When a Russian oligarch does something, people boo. And I'm going to give you the specific example as it pertains to space. So President Zelensky in Ukraine, he's like, hey, Elon, we don't have any Wi-Fi internet. Send us Starlink. Elon
Mhm.
jumps on Twitter. He's like, bet, got you. And so they reposition their Starlink constellation. They send them some terminals so they can provide Wi-Fi to Ukraine. It's like, wow, that's super cool. On one hand, that is super cool. It's like immediate action. There's a need 100%. On the other side of that, from a policy perspective, you have an American oligarch, one of the richest people on the planet, unilaterally making policy decisions about the space economy without consulting their government. And it's like, oh man, what does that mean? I'm like, I don't know. But if Elon tried that shit with Taiwan and China, China would have something to say about it. And that's the danger of when you live in a connected world where you have the oligarchs. Again, whether you're a Russian oligarch or an American oligarch, you're super wealthy and you're unilaterally making national policy decisions that could accidentally push your country into a war. And
Mhm.
if you accidentally push America into a war, it's sort of like that old saying, when America sneezes, the world catches a cold. Same thing. And so we really have to be attuned. I know there's some really tragic, horrible things happening on the ground. We need to be attuned to, as the space economy develops, what things are happening above our head. Because right now, I'm in DC, you're in the United Kingdoms. This call is being made possible by probably a satellite going around the Earth. And so we're all part of the space economy. If you use anything with GPS, you have one of these supercomputers that you typically just use to scroll through
Mhm.
Instagram on. This is part of the space economy. And people think that, hey, the space economy, one, they don't know it exists. And two, they're
Mhm.
like, that doesn't affect me. I'm like, are you kidding me? Have you seen a 40-mile convoy? Have you seen a convoy of Russian trucks backed up for 40 miles? Where do you think that photo came from? And they're like, it came from a satellite. I'm like, yeah, guess how many satellites we have in space specifically for intelligence? And so people often don't think about the space economy because they don't see it and they feel like they don't connect to it. And this is where I just challenge them that, one, you've never actually been on the internet. They'd be like, what do you mean? I'm
Mhm.
like, have you ever physically gotten on the internet? They're like, yeah, I do that every day. I'm like, no, you don't. You interact with the GUI, graphic user interface, to access the internet. The space economy is the same way. We interact with it every day. We just don't cognitively think about it. And I'm going to end this rant going back to the original position of be mindful of the space economy and be mindful of space doctrine and how it develops. Because while we're fighting a ground war, the next war looks like it's going to be not only in cyberspace, but space, like low Earth
Mhm.
orbit space.
It also feels like a lot of that room was filled up over the last couple of years without us even knowing. So obviously the US, including Elon Musk, including Russia then as well, and China, were just stating their claim, kind of building shit in space. No one really understood anything. Like if you were telling me about satellites and stuff, I just wouldn't really understand this,
Mhm,
because why would I? And I felt like they kind of got their kind of territory set up. It's kind of like a what it's almost like is that there's a map being created in space, but we haven't actually mapped it yet. If you to go back to like literally Columbus time, where it's like we don't know what the map looks like, it's kind
mhm,
of like that right now. I couldn't tell you what particular areas are controlled, and it's like to your point, it's like as this is kind of being colonized to a degree, there's no safe zone. There's no particular areas that you can't interact with, or is there? I could be wrong on that, to be honest. But to the same point, you could just be operating freely.
mhm,
And that's where this becomes really important because they have said the next area from ground fighting will be more intensive, be more air, and it could be a lot more extreme.
mhm. So just one point of clarification. I take off your list Venezuela. They don't really have that many space assets. They do have friendly relationships with Russia, and Russia has quite a number of space assets. Um, but generally speaking, you're right, because space has been colonized in most countries. It is not on their priority, and so this
Mhm.
is where you have Elon Musk, private guy, no one voted for him. He's not elected, saying, "I own this orbit." And remember, this is my super advanced spacecraft. So this is a rocket, right? When the rocket gets up, it pops off a capsule. Nowadays the rockets come and they're reusable, so they can reuse them. They land, and so this is now a satellite, and it's going around in an orbit. And so as the satellite goes around in this orbit, it's like a parking spot at the mall. Elon Musk has taken all the good parking spots at the mall. And he's like, if you want to go to space, you can still park. You just got to park in a shitty parking spot somewhere else. Because once your satellite is in orbit in this parking spot, you can't put another satellite in that. Otherwise, they will collide and create space debris, as well as damage millions of dollars worth of assets, and potentially set off a international issue, a diplomatic issue. Because if China decides that Elon Musk is being cute about providing Wi-Fi to Taiwan or someplace that they have a different agenda for, and they go out and take out his satellite, now Elon Musk he's what is he gonna do? He's like, hey, you destroyed my property. China's like, I'm a government. So what? Elon's gonna be like, I need to complain to someone, or you've got a satellite up there that took out something. I'm gonna launch another satellite and take out yours. Now you have a private business who's basically at war in space. And that's why it's important to be aware that the space economy exists, number one. And as it grows out, it's not just about, most people think rocket launches, like, oh, big sexy rockets. I don't really care about that. These are the Uber drivers of the space economy. Very little money in rocket launches. Sometimes they blow up. But then you have the satellites. Satellites have some money in it, but satellites are only there to get data, beam data back down. And we've all seen satellite data, particularly in the Russia-Ukraine war, because where do you think those images come from? And that data is super valuable, super important, because from the data from these satellites, that's what actually determines our boots on the ground as well as our foreign policy. So again, in many regards, space is being colonized by the robber barons of space, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Virgin Galactic, etc. And the rest of the world is going to catch up to this and be like, hey, you already colonized us once. We're not going to do this twice in a 100% digital ecosystem, because space is a 100% digital ecosystem.
Christ, man, that's so intense. And it's funny because, like, as you mentioned previously before we started recording, is like these are the things that no one's talking about until it happened. Until something happens. And like you were mentioning there earlier about, like, people having contingencies and people thinking like longer term views, that often it's kind of like an afterthought. It's like, I'm too busy with today's problem to worry about something that could potentially harm me full time. So it's about just kind of having that perspective, I think, and being able to realize what's coming around the corner without maybe probably negating your entire day to day. Because if you thought about all the stuff that could potentially happen, you'd also just completely fuck your entire system, wouldn't you?
You'd be super stressed. So one of the things for any business out there listening, the biggest threat to your business's operation and business's future is stress. FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. A lot of anxiety because people don't know what's going to happen. So if you're thinking like, oh, what can I do to prepare, strategically align, make sure your morale remains high. Because at the end of the day, like, the only reason Ukraine is still doing so well or rather, the only reason Ukraine still persists in their fight against Russia is because they have high morale. It's not. This is where Russia learns that old adage: it's not the size of the dog, but the size of the fight in the dog. And so this is a reflection of high morale on Ukraine, because yeah, they're outmatched, numerically, tactically, from air, from weapons, but they might be outmatched, but they're unbowed, unbent, unbroken. And whenever you have someone who's fighting for home court advantage and fighting for home, they will remain unbowed, unbent, unbroken, until their last breath.
Crazy, man. Yeah, I completely agree. It's all about attitude at the end of the day. Want to get into some of the areas around crypto around us at the moment. So, you obviously have extreme people on all sides of perspectives. You had the extreme people that were like, oh, like, Bitcoin's going to zero, it's all a load of bollocks, it's a load of shit. And you also have other people that are saying that, it's your new currency, right? But without those two kind of sides to it, we did see a genuine use case for it being used during Russia and Ukraine, especially at the very beginning. They opened up two wallets, Ether and a BTC, and now they've actually opened up an actual more broader wallet that actually facilitates all cryptos, or a lot of them anyway, to be sent in. What's your kind of thoughts on from that perspective? And do you think this kind of opens opportunities for something that's longer term now, outside of the metaverse world, whereby we need to go back to the real world? But is there a case for long term benefits here?
Humans wanted to do a good thing, a nice thing, and donate. That's awesome. So there are some humans who had cryptos and were like, oh, we should donate. but the majority of donations were still done in cash. And
Mm.
so again, if you want to replace the dollar, the pound sterling, or the euro, you need a standing army to do that. That's it. And so it's great that folks want to donate. But again, when you send crypto to Ukraine, it still has to be converted to the local currency, so it can be used to purchase good products and services. So if you can just send people dollars or pound sterlings, or you use PayPal, Venmo, Square, Mango Pay, etc., you should just do that. So does it have long-term potential? Yes, but not like you're thinking about it, because again, you have to, the reason that in this instance, there's still a KYC AML, know your customer, anti-money laundering check that goes through, in which case just use a dollar, just send it from your bank. It just gets so much easier. They're like, oh, we got to exchange it. You have to pay exchange fees and all that. I'm like, there's still a middleman when you send cryptos, unless you do peer to peer. But
Mhm.
the majority of crypto payments aren't done peer to peer. They're done peer to exchange to wallet to peer. There's like 3 or 4 extra steps in there. So is there a use case? I think that cryptos are really fun, very exciting. If you use them as gift cards, if you use them as coupons, if you use them in a closed system, like a Chuck E. Cheese type system or a Subway system, where when you give someone a crypto and this token represents access to this system, I think that is super important. But remember, this token only works in your Subway system or at your Chuck E. Cheese. There is no exchange for this, because the good products or service you access using this digital token don't magically go up in value or price just because you have a digital token. I have this conversation quite a bit with the real estate world and the folks who want to create DAOs and issue and tokenize real estate. I'm like,
Mhm.
Darren's not going to pay an extra $1,500 a month just so your token can go up in value. And so if you're tokenizing real estate, there's a cap of how much rent you can charge rather. And so it's called your EBITDA. What does EBITDA stand for? Earnings, benefits before taxes, something like that. There's your EBITDA, and then there's your cap rate. And your cap rate is you have a 100 unit building. How many people are all 100 units rented? What's your occupancy rate? 2, what is the rent that you charge per unit? Sometimes it varies depending on the size. And
Mhm.
so that tells you your cap rate, how much you're going to make. A good cap rate on a real estate deal is like 11%. That's like a really solid cap rate. Most of them are somewhere in the 5 to 7% range. And so just because you tokenize the financing, the raising of fund, the crowdfunding of your building with your token, it doesn't magically make that building worth more, because you can only charge but so much rent. So when you say so a long way to say, yes, there is a space for cryptos, but not like how we think.
Mm. Is there an opportunity there around the intermediary? Is there an actual opportunity there? So I know you're saying that there's several different steps. So one would be obviously you're uploading from USD to your account, to your platform, and then you're sending it, and then you're taking it back out. And there's like there's 3 or potentially 4 in the fund flow. But even in that like DAO situation, I'm just kind of thinking through like what are the actual possibilities? What is the actual benefit for a person doing that? What is the actual benefit for something like a mainstream crypto to actually kind of take a step further because of the fact that they don't have potential like fees in the middle? Um, is that the only benefit you're thinking of? Like, what is the some of that kind of sides to the argument?
Um, Coinbase, Binance, Bittrex. I'm just thinking Oasis. I'm just thinking of some middlemen, some exchanges.
Mhm.
The majority of people, they go to an exchange. The exchange is the middleman. Just go to your
Mhm.
bank. Because if you replace the word with exchange with the word bank, you're still sending value. And
Mhm.
so, again, peer to peer cryptos work. The moment you introduce a third party wallet, not your keys, not your crypto, and exchange, Binance, Bittrex, whomever, Circle, uh, that just that defeats the whole premise of Bitcoin white paper title, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, not a peer to exchange to bank to exchange to private wallet to peer system.
100%. That just takes away from like the actual, like the whole thesis you said to the white paper, or all to what they actually want. So there is like the Bitcoin maxis that do want that one way, which is fair. That's the actual thesis, but the reality of it was always different. And to be honest, like when you mentioned Coinbase and stuff, they have fees as well.
Oh
It's
yeah,
not like
Coinbase, they make millions of dollars,
of
billions of
course.
dollars off
But
of
that's just
fees.
off the fee. And I don't even
Yeah.
know, did they have a custody fee? Did they have anything like this? Just even like holding of your cash or whatever. But there's also that element to it. Um, you mentioned regulation, which is probably a great time to kind of get into it. So there's been a lot of stuff going around Canada in particular first, the US recently, and even the UK. Like the UK is kind of always ongoing. Like there's always this ongoing talks. Um, what's your thoughts on regulation in general in a crypto sense, and especially how it could impact a lot of price at the moment, considering it's kind of been wedged between that 30 and 40K zone for a bit of time at the moment?
Well, you bring up a good point, because the price of something is not the value of something.
Mhm.
Because the value of a good night's sleep, I don't know, how much are you willing to pay, particularly if you had to move from Kharkiv to Warsaw? So it's like, oh, what's the value of a good night's sleep? I don't know. You got to really think about it, considering the conditions. And so when you look at these digital thingamajiggies, I like to call them digital thingamajiggies versus digital currencies, because digital thingamajiggies is far more accurate. We could call them coupons if you really want to get some people upset. When you look at digital thingamajiggies, often people confuse the price with the value, and the prices. You see this with NFTs. If you find a greater fool to buy this NFT, this 42 character receipt to a URL of this pin, not the actual pin itself, then congratulations, that is a new price, because the
Mhm.
greater fool purchases from you. And so you're going to see people who are still speculating about, what do I do? Where can I move my money to save and preserve my money? One, due to inflation. Two, due to the uncertainty of the potential for a global war. And so you'll see people going into Bitcoin as a store of value, going as a pledge against inflation, and it will maintain a certain level of price, because people believe it is going to hedge against the war, inflation, etc. And that's where that value comes from. That value is based simply upon belief. And it's like, oh, if you want to be in the mystic arts or the pseudo religious area of your financial situation is based upon strangers' beliefs, then you should
Mhm.
put your money into Bitcoin. If you're a crazy person like myself, you still carry cash, but you buy things like cigarettes, bourbon, oil. I don't know if, again, not investor advice, but once upon a time when oil was trading at minus $30 a barrel, you probably could have just bought a bunch of it, had you just been thinking oil is going to go back up. And now it went from negative $30 to, I think it's like 115ish, 130ish at the moment. So that's a huge delta, nice spread. Someone crushed it. Hopefully that was you. But again, you just have to be looking at not just the price, but what's the value. Carl Icahn, he was an investor advocate here in America in the 80s, where he looked for businesses that were undervalued and figured out how to, one, replace the board, and two, take over, and then bring up their price, to reflect their value. Everyone's always looking for an undervalued asset that they can buy low and sell high. So our
Mhm.
crypto is an undervalued asset. It depends on people's sentiments, because that's what sentiments and feelings, because that's what gives crypto their value.
It's driven way more as well in crypto sense compared to, like you said there, but that guy picking particular companies, because particular companies are selling actual assets and the actual physical products, and there's resources, and even the resources can be priced at a certain point.
Let me give you a good example. My nephew, who I just adore to no end, he's 19, so I like fucking with him. I bought him a 2014 Chevy Spark. Why this is so funny? Because he's a big kid. He's like 6'4", 2 meters tall. He's tall. And so the Spark is a little tiny car, and I think it's hilarious. He's a big kid. He's 19. He's in a tiny car. He's like all 19-year-olds trying to figure out what to do with his life. Uh, And there's a part on the car for your airflow intake that is on back order 3 to 12 months. And why I'm bringing this up to you now is when we're talking about value, global supply chain has been interrupted by all the shenanigans coming out of Ukraine and Russia. China produces the majority of parts for a lot of stuff. And so depending on how this conflict goes, you're going to see what is the value of used car parts. Because if you can't, because if, I mean, I think the UK produces like Jaguars, maybe, unless they
It
sold it
used to
off.
be a huge producer of cars.
Yeah.
Huge. And then it just
Jaguars, Bentleys,
completely
Rolls
went
Royce, that used to
backwards, yeah.
come out of UK.
Yeah, and a lot more in London as well. Lotus. Lotus was in
Oh
London,
yeah,
I'm pretty
Lotus, that's
yeah.
right. Peugeot? Where's
Lotus,
Peugeot is French, no?
French, yeah. There was a couple of other really good ones, and then they all closed down the turn of the 2000s. Basically, 'cause a lot of it just got, either
Outsourced.
outsourced to Asia or else, yeah, mainly. Same with kind of Detroit. Like, Detroit was obviously like a booming city and
Mhm.
everyone, it was great, like place of living, whatever. And then, obviously it just went to shit. I've heard stories like if you drove down Detroit with a Honda or whatever, like the car would get stoned. Would get
Yeah.
genuinely stoned in like the 80s or 90s.
But what this highlights when we talk about value is as all those companies got outsourced, they got sent overseas to Asia. We're going to see what is the value of used car parts. What is the value of just having domestic production, meaning you build this thing in country?
Mhm.
And I know we're supposed to be talking about the value of cryptocurrencies, but those are based on faith. It's like I feel good, therefore it is worth X. But then there's things that do have, I don't want to use the term intrinsic value, but have value that is readily apparent, particularly when we look at the number of pieces, parts for your cell phone, your car, etc., that are no longer manufactured domestically. Domestically, whether it's in the US or domestically, whether it's in UK or Europe. And then what's the value of having domestic production so that your chain can't be disrupted, so that your country can be more independent, either through energy or production? What's the value of that? And so this is where your people are about to learn the price they pay for not valuing domestic production. And that's different than when we talk about quote unquote monies or cryptos.
Mm. How does that work in a supply chain sense? So, like, let's say I always, see Joe Rogan talk about it quite a lot about, if they produced locally in the US or whatever. So you take a lot of these things home, iPhones, cars, let's say. Would that not just lead to like hyperinflation to a degree? Because we'll have, you know, iPhones costing like $4,000 to produce because we're
Mhm.
not going to be able to pay them, you know, pay the employees absolutely nothing. The parts will cost a lot. They'll obviously be produced locally, so it wouldn't be as much, but it would still be quite a lot, though. How does that work? If you were to envision it from an economics perspective.
Well, we don't even need to have an economics perspective. We need to have a political perspective, political chat first on what is a living wage.
Mm,
And so, in order to have a conversation of a living wage, we have to talk about capitalism because you want to get something produced. This phone cost me $1,500. It's a Samsung Galaxy S10. I super like it. Does lots of cool things. The reason it only costs $1,500 is because it's made overseas. If it was produced domestically, it probably cost, $6,000. And so the question is, am I willing to pay someone a living wage? Or is it not even a living wage? Because people assume that labor costs are what drive expenses for the consumer. What if the executives didn't make 200 times more than their average employee? What if they only made 100 times more, or 50, or 20, or 10 times more? Now we have to have a conversation about morality and uh, individual manifest destiny because uh, Elon Tesla is like, oh, I pay more taxes than God. And I'm like, that's super cool. But if you ask Elon who his customers are for his rockets, they're the US government. In theory, they're the US people. You can't be a billionaire if we weren't funding that. But then
mm,
there's like, no, 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 he's self-made. I'm like, self-made if his daddy owns some gem mines in South Africa, and then Uncle Sam, through taxpayers, gave him billions of dollars. So we don't have to have an economic conversation. First, we need to have a moral conversation, then a political conversation, um, because there is a position where you can actually get things built domestically and pay people a great living wage. It just requires the top of the business to not take 90% of the profit. So pick any Fortune 500 company, every CEO makes at least 100 times more than their average employee.
Mm. Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's interesting because, like, I suppose that is that capitalism perspective. It's like I always say this in podcasting. It's 1% of the host take 99% of the revenue generated,
Yep.
and 99% of people fight out for the 1% of revenue that's left. Now,
Yep.
is that competition or is that capitalism? And then it's kind of like, okay, then if you take it into a corporate structure, it's like these people are, trying to get ahead of other companies, trying to get more aggressive, better, trying to bring in new talent. Like, I'm trying to say, like, okay, obviously it comes from the top down, but does it also come from like the bottom up in such a way that, like, to get people that are like really experienced and really good in the Fortune 500 companies, they need to be paid considerably a lot more?
Mhm. And so I see we're coming up on almost an hour here, and I want to make sure that in the next 10 minutes or so, we talk about DAOs,
Yeah,
distributed
cool, man.
autonomous organizations, um, because part of this is there's no difference between a DAO and a labor union. And so labor unions are there to address the discrepancy between how much management gets paid, ownership, and everyone else. And so if you look at a DAO, it's a bunch of humans get together in a DAO to say, we want to do a thing.
Can you
We're going to,
explain it first, for people? Because some people, including myself, don't know it that well.
okay, distributed autonomous organizations are called DAOs. And so there's no, you're going to hear all kind of craziness where people think that they can form this DAO and this DAO will be self-governing. It's by self-governing, meaning they wrote what they call smart contracts, but that's a misnomer. They're not smart, nor are they contracts. So a DAO writes smart contracts that govern how the DAO operates. And so if you think of a DAO as a labor union or if you're in the real estate world, a co-op or cooperative, it's a much easier way to understand a DAO. The only difference is when the blockchain nerds say DAO, they mean that it's quote unquote self-governed by smart contracts. And so the smart contracts are neither smart nor contracts because they're no different than terms and conditions. So every time you log onto a website, it says, "Do you accept these terms and conditions?" And there's a little box. You can't actually negotiate those terms or conditions. All you can do if you want to proceed is check the box and click "I accept." How smart is that contract? Because you can't change the terms or conditions. So, Darren, you can be part of my DAO, but in my terms of conditions, in my smart contracts for my DAO, I, Samson, get 90% of all revenues created. You're either in or you're out. You're
Mhm.
like, that doesn't sound very smart at all. I'm like, Darren, but it's a smart contract. It's self-governing. It's self-executing. Just do it. It's okay if I razzle dazzled you with words you don't understand. Trust me. This is a trustless system. I'm like, you need to tell me this is a trustless system? It sounds rather odd. Sort of like
Mhm.
if a wolf invites you over for dinner and you're the sheep. It's like, oh, you want to have me for dinner? Because that doesn't mean what you think it means when a wolf says, hey, I'd like to have you over for dinner. And so going back to that labor union model in a DAO, distributed autonomous organization, humans get together to do something. Depending on what those humans want to do, like if you want to invest in real estate, those humans will call that uh, group of humans a REIT, real estate investment trust. And
Mhm.
the real estate investment trust, they go buy an apartment building. You have other humans who get together and say, hey, we want to get together and buy an apartment building, but we're going to do it as a cooperative. And in the cooperative, everyone has a fair share. Because in the REIT, you get paid depending on how your contribution. In the cooperative, everyone has a fair share. In other models, humans get together and they crowdfund for a building. Slightly different, but in each of these are slightly different models, but all of them require humans to come together to do something. In a DAO, humans come together to do something, but then there's that self-governance, that smart contract layer that says, we're going to introduce terms and conditions that require you to automatically consent and agree to these terms and conditions, even if you don't understand them. They call those terms and conditions smart contracts. Where people get really pissed with DAOs is when someone like myself, I read the terms and conditions and I understand the governance model of this DAO. And I realize, particularly and I realized that, hey, there are 2,000 members of this DAO who've each put in $100, right? There's $200,000 in this DAO's bank account. I read the rules and I realized through some DAOs have something called staking, or it's called
Mhm.
proof of stake, where I can get with Darren and we can swing 51% of the vote to me, which automatically triggers the payment of all $200,000 out of this DAO fund. Some people say that's fraud. Some people say that's hacking. I say it's someone who read the terms and conditions and is following your governance model. And so this is a common hack, quote unquote hack, in the DAO space. But people are always trying to come together to form a better, fair, more equitable way of operating. The
Mhm.
blockchain folks, they've confused this. They've said, hey, we're going to do this through DAOs, through self-governance, through smart contracts. It doesn't work, because when you have smart contracts, I just was teasing someone where if they wanted to set up a DAO, so I told them, first, go form a labor union. Second, automate the rules of the labor union using a coding language no one has ran against cybersecurity requirements. Lastly, yell, curse, and be mad as fuck that your so-called DAO works as well as a labor union ran on an automated telephone. Press 0 to speak to a customer service representative with a heavy offshore accent. Because when you automate your terms and conditions, it's just like calling a phone 800 number and hitting 1, hitting 4, hitting 1, hitting 4. At some point, you get super frustrated. You just want to talk to a human. And
Yeah.
so whether you're trying to form a labor union or you're trying to form a DAO that advocates for humans in a labor union, you still need humans, because there are many things you just cannot automate. And I think this current crisis in the world, it shows you can't automate morality, you can't automate empathy, you can't automate what you might think of as common sense or as even just basic common decency. So
Mhm.
not that there's not a future for DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations, but as people learn more about them, they'll be like, oh, I understand what a DAO is. It's a union. Check. Now I understand. And then you can get into, do I want to be part of this union and pay the dues or not? Because you're right
Mhm.
back to being a DAO, because you can only be part of a DAO if you pay into it.
That's crazy. It's almost political. It acts in like a political sense because it's like,
100%.
oh, self-governing, as in like the outside world. On this inside, we can run it better. We can run a crowdfunding experiment better. And that's the issue, is the fact that you have a couple people come together, and you might have seen like the meme, or not. It's not actually not a meme. It's actually a quote. Like, never underestimate the power of like stupid people coming together. Uh, I
America in a
al-
nutshell.
Oh yeah, I always see Daniel Morrow always post that. If you've ever seen him on LinkedIn, you'd love some of his posts. He's an anti-Bitcoin guy. Now again, I'm not saying that I'm anti-Bitcoin. It's just whenever I see this, I like to say both sides of the argument, because that's the way things should kind of be looked at in general. Um, but I always think of that example whenever I see something kick off, like new projects or new ideas. It's just like, okay, what's happening? Who's profiting? Because there's always someone who's going to come out with a better hand. It's like, who's coming out with all the cash here? Who's getting screwed over? If you look at 10 people, there'll be a handful of people getting absolutely screwed, that's for sure. uh and what's your impact on this? Like, what are you going to do to this? So it's interesting, man. Only time will tell. I think a big thing will be a massive bear market will wipe out all this, and that's the best thing. It clears out all the bullshit.
100%, 100%. So it's like all bubbles. After it pops, it's what remains. And so it's not that there's not a place, but conservatively, 98% of blockchain based thingamajiggies are vaporware and bullshit.
Mhm.
That last 2%, they will be like the .com companies, but most people can't afford to have a 98% losses when they're making bets and wagers on startups
Mhm.
and novel technology. And I cannot stress how whatever the technology is, they haven't bumped it up against cybersecurity. Cybersecurity was not front and foremost, not only from the sense of being hacked, and it's not even a cybersecurity issue when you have DAOs. But if you just look at the governance models and what these terms and condition rules, these if then that rules allow, that's where the shenanigan comes in. Because I'm a dumb human, so I'm going to do things that your really smart engineer and coder never anticipated, and I'm going to break your fancy thing because I'm a moron. I went to public school in Texas. Anyone be like, Samson, he's dumb as hell. And I'll be like, yep. And that's how I broke your multi-million-dollar thing. I broke it in the sense of I drained all the funds. And they'll be like,
Mhm.
oh, you hacked it. I'm like, but I'm a moron. And we all know that. I just followed the
Mhm.
rules you wrote.
Oh my god, man. And it's all in T's and C's, you know? It's all in T's and C's. Man, I wanna say a massive thank you. I love these sessions. We should do more of them. I know you're obviously a million miles an hour every day, and so am I, but they're just
Uh-huh.
fun.
Yeah, yeah. Just let me know.
They're
I
just fun.
tend to be a bit busy. Always happy to chat. Um, and I keep saying you live in UK when clearly you don't. So you got to correct me. What part of the universe are you in at the moment?
Ireland.
Yeah, yeah. But what part of Ireland?
Dublin.
Dublin. Yeah, yeah. Dublin's
Yeah, 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 yeah.
still not part of the UK. If you were in like Derry or
Yeah, yeah.
Belfast, I'd be like UK. But correct me on that. I don't want anyone from oh let me get them all riled up from Londonderry mad at me.